Howdy, gang. So, how's your day been? How's your week been? Um, Mine's been pretty good. Pretty stressful, pretty good. Just chilling, quarantine. It's getting crazy, but, we're moving. We're good. And so, I guess we'll continue with the next question. So, what have we done? So, we've done who, what, and now where. We're on where now. And I guess that feels like a weird question for this, because it's like, where am I? Where's my channel? Where I'm at in life? It feels kind of weird because we're going to have to be using where metaphorically, because I don't think it's really that interesting to say where I am, like geographically or spatially. Plus, don't think I really want to right now. So where am I? At first, when I decided to do this channel, and I decided on doing this kind of these opening questions for the channel, I thought where would be really weird and hard to answer. But as I've sat down now, it honestly feels like one of the best and most important questions to answer, at least metaphorically. And it's kind of funny because right now I'm in the car, there's like the car, I'm in my car, and I'm driving. I'm in the car for like 3 to 4 hours. And so it's kind of funny that I decided to record this video while driving. So hopefully the car isn't too distracting, but I don't really care. I'm going to probably post it anyways. So where am I? And I think I'll spend the majority of this in the context of where I am in my life, and where I'm going to, and where I've been, and where I want to go. And so, I guess starting out, I graduated college in 2018. And since then, I've been fortunate enough to work in a lab, doing research, and I planned to do it for 2 years, and we're coming up on the second year now. We're in the second year, and the plan is to apply to grad school this coming fall, and to enter grad school in the fall of 21. Excuse me. And so that's where I've been aiming to go. But it's been interesting, right? Like, in this gap year period, I've learned a lot about where I want to go and where I am. And I think in part of that, or at least a part of that, is this channel. I think a lot of how I felt over this past year has been the metaphor brought me here, or caused me to start searching for different avenues and places to go with my life. And I think a major part of why this past 2 years has led to that, while I think previously maybe they haven't had this much of an impact. It's like I haven't suddenly on a whim decided to make a YouTube channel, is that up until I graduated college, and I think this is a common case, a lot of people and kids aren't out of school. Granted, there are people that aren't, fortunate enough to go to school or decide not to, and for various reasons, and I'm not here to make a stance on that or talk about that, at least right now. But those of us that did go to school, for better or for worse, it is interesting, right? Like, I think for a lot of us, at least for myself, I was always afraid of growing up, and afraid of like moving out, and afraid of, I guess, the responsibility of that comes along with that, and the fear of facing the real world, And so when it came to senior year of high school, like, I applied to college. I was fortunate enough that I could go. I went to a small community college before transferring. And fortunate that my parents were so supportive the whole time. As I'm first generation going to college in my family. But, I for instance, so I majored in biology in college, basically. I mean, the full major was also had a little sociology in there and a little health. And there's a pre-med major because I wanted to pursue medicine. And thinking back in retrospect, right, like, it's not even like from a young age I wanted to be a doctor. I actually, as a kid, always wanted to be a video game designer. And as I got older and took some programming classes, I was like, fuck that. Don't want to do that. But then I always liked biology and life, so the study of life, the study of behavior in particular. But then I took my either junior or senior year of high school, I think senior year, anatomy and physiology, and that was fucking amazing. I was just enamored. Thought it was so cool. There's so many beautiful. It's wild how complex the human body is, or any really organism's body. And so, in the context of that enjoyment, in the context that interest, in the context of, like, I didn't want to be an adult. I didn't want to get a job yet. I went to college and studied that. I'm thankful. My brother's 12 years older than me, and so growing up, I saw the horribleness of malicious loans and college debt from a very young age. I had like a 12-year head start on fearing that, and I wasn't the best student. Didn't do the best in high school, mostly because of my reading, because I'm very dyslexic. Always tried, but I'd say, so I went to community college, but I still went to college to avoid, working. And like my first year of community college, I didn't work at all. I didn't really have a job in high school either. My parents were fortunate enough that they were like, you have the rest of your life to work, or it's okay if you just want to focus on your school. I think in combination of that mentality with my reading disability, they knew I was always trying. I always gave it all. I didn't really always succeed, but it wasn't until my second year in community college because I was still pre-med, doing pretty well. I got straight A's. I got a job they give different names for hospitals. There's sitters or patient observers. Basically, I just sat with patients at a hospital and made sure they didn't hurt themselves if they were suicidal, hurt others if they're homicidal, or if they had dementia, kept them from doing anything that would harm them, or, that was like the job, right? And then I ended up applying originally I wanted to go to a state school. There was a great program in my state where I could basically get half the tuition paid for or cut off the bill, and it was a pretty good school. And on a whim, there was a really good school that I toured, and it was just gorgeous. It's one of the most beautiful campuses I've ever seen before. It's a well-known school. It's really good, and I didn't think I would ever get into it, and I wasn't going to apply to it. I applied, I think, 4 schools to transfer to, and I literally wrote the 2 letters, letters you need to fill out for this transfer to the school. The night of, I finished them and passed them like 30 minutes before midnight, the deadline, and I was accepted. It just blew my mind. It still kind of blows my mind. So I went there, and you always hear that 4-year colleges are much harder than community college. That community college is 13th grade, and I still can't tell if that's the case, or if it's just that the school I ended up going to is really hard and really competitive. which is it's a really good school. But for I struggled. My first, I'd say, year and a half. It was a battle. Everybody there was just so smart and so hardworking, and you think that you're smart, or you're competent. Let's say. So I don't like the idea of smartness. You say you feel like you're competent, right? And then suddenly, in a normal distribution of the population, right? You are 1 out of 100. But then suddenly you have this hyper concentrated distribution of all the 1 out of 100s. Excuse me. At this school, if I have 1 out of thousands there as well. Maybe 1 out of millions. Who knows? Who's my class? But you go there and you really struggle. And I learned a lot, and I grew as a person. I thought I learned what it meant to really understand something and not just memorize stuff. And so, I struggled there, made some great friends, still have a great friend group, I think. But since then, I also work at the school in the lab, doing research. And that's where I've come from, right? That's my journey. I'm from a kid who couldn't read, still really struggle with it. I was reading at a like 3rd grade to 5th grade level until my sophomore, junior of high school. Got private tutoring, did a little better. Then suddenly there's a kind of like I don't know anything about autism or other sort of any sort of thing that could give you some sort of disability or make something very difficult, an impairment. But my dyslexia, suddenly, this often happens with those where there's you hit this critical period, this threshold, and suddenly everything just kind of falls into place. And I don't think my reading is perfect, so I'm still pretty slow. My comprehension and ability is very good now. And so I was very fortunate at that, and here I am now. And so I don't really know why I went into such detail with that, but that's where I'm from in a lot of ways. I'm also from a very small town of 7,000. But I guess maybe the where I'm from then leads to the question of where I'm going, And if you asked me 4 years ago, right, when I transferred schools, I would say I'm going to be a doctor. But that's not where I ended up doing. I think a lot of pre-meds realize that it's just not a career path they want. I wasn't the best at those subjects. I worked my ass off, did great in physiology, did, I'd say, par, maybe a little above par in organic chemistry, but it just didn't interest me to that degree. I think there's a switch that went off while at school where I kind of realized, and I'm still kind of figuring this out, it seems to me, right, that life is hard, everything is hard. Everything's going to be struggling. Everything's going to be a struggle, a challenge. And so the point isn't to find something that is necessarily the most challenging, right? Because you can make the most simplest thing challenging, right? It's not necessarily hard in theory, right, to shoot a ball into a basket, right? But in practice, the logistics of becoming the best basketball player is very hard. And so, or maybe it's not hard to kick a soccer ball into a goal, right? It's really not. The hard part then comes when you start trying to master that against people and on a field moving, right? You can up the ante and make everything hard. And so to me, it seems like the goal then is not to find necessarily something that's hard to do to make yourself better or to improve yourself. It's to find something that you, even when it's at its hardest and most unbearable, you still couldn't imagine doing something else. And that's I'm open to changing that. I guess I don't actually, as I'm saying this, I don't feel as confident about that conclusion or that idea, but that's kind of where I've brought me where I am in the past few years when I stopped pursuing medicine, because I realized sorry about that. I had a phone call. It's probably going to be another, I guess, 2 hours, an hour since last recording. But yeah, so I think I left off talking about, finding something that so you want to find something that you can bear, at its worst. And I think that's gotten to me where I am now, right? And where I am now is in that gap year, both, I guess, literally taking a gap year for graduate school, but also I guess mentally and metaphorically, right? Like, it has felt like a gap year. It has felt different. I haven't been in school, been in a different headspace. And I guess in that headspace, right, I can't tell if these problems of expression were just always there, like murmuring underneath the surface, or if they were fulfilled in school, but now that I'm out of school, they're missing. I'm more inclined towards the former. I'm more inclined to think that they were always bubbling, just because. Actually, I really don't know why. It's a good question. But yeah, I guess that's where I'm at. I'm in a gap year, and we're trying to figure it out. We're trying to figure out how to express myself, and yeah. I guess I'm rambling now. I'm kind of out of the headspace I was in before, but I guess I'll leave you guys with that. Where I want to go? I don't know. I want to go to grad school, but also I want to see what else life has to offer sometimes, There's so many ways to learn and experience this world, and it makes you wonder after being in school for, from age 6 to 23, and then effectively doing research, which has been that different from school, 2 years, and then looking down another 6 years of a PhD program. You really wonder, right? Like, there is a life outside of formal education. What does that life look like? What does that life offer that this doesn't? And I guess another part of this channel is me trying to figure that out for myself, right? I love learning and thinking. I don't think there's anything more in this that I'd really find more peace and enjoyment with, and talking with people about their ideas and learning new things from other people. It's so wonderful and lovely. But I think a lot of people in school, right, they don't feel that, right? It's common people feel that they're not learning anything in school. They're just forced to go. And I've never really felt that per se, but I get it. Like in retrospect, right? Like there were times I didn't have a good class, I felt, or I didn't learn something as efficiently as I should have, or really, it was on me to learn the thing in the class. The instructor didn't do a good job doing presenting it, or really putting the effort in to teach it. But and so you wonder, right? Like, will that be life outside of school? Will I not learn things? And I think, as much as everyone kind of craps all over millennials and Zoomers for being silly and not wanting to try, right? And I agree with a lot of stuff in some ways, but in other way, right? Like, I think since our generation has been so is the most educated generation because education was pushed upon us, so at least formal education was pushed upon us so gravely, and just were shoved down our throats for a lot of us. I think it makes us not want to necessarily leave that comfort of the promise of learning something. We might not always learn something, some of us in school and in college, but the promise is there. I don't know if entirely this Peter Pan syndrome that happens in college for a lot of kids is always entirely just not wanting to face responsibility. At the beginning of this video, I said that I didn't want to grow up and get a job, and that's not wrong. I'm not contradicting that now, but as I think about it more, there's different reasons why you wouldn't want to grow up and get a job, and I think, at least for myself, that reason was because I don't want to not have the promise or the thing or the dream of learning, right? Like, I think what people that work in jobs that don't have promise of education, right? That's the hole in them. That's what they feel alienated from and they miss, and they feel hollow inside with. Is you're not learning something new, right? You feel yourself burning time and burning yourself, right? Like if you're in school per se, right? And maybe this is just me. Maybe I'm overgeneralizing too much right now. But I think a lot of people that maybe a part of that phenomena, thinking back, wow, like back, I know a lot of people, maybe myself even, say, oh, back in school it was so much easier back then, right? And I think at least one of the things that we took for granted before was that mental security of the promise of learning something. Like, I think maybe not always, but a lot of us really do want to learn things. Maybe, and I think those students, I think, that really have everything going for them, but they don't want to do school and they flunk out. They're so smart. That's the motivator, is they actually want to learn things, but they don't feel school is providing it, and so they feel that sense of alienation, like many people feel once they're out of school when they're working a job. They don't feel that sense of security, that sense of promise. And I guess as I'm looking down, the barrel of a PhD program, I'm very fortunate, and the lab I work in right now is wonderful, and I never feel like I'm not learning new things. And I can't imagine how much I'll learn throughout the PhD program. But, with everybody, you always second guess yourself or question yourself. And I guess maybe where I'm at right now is a question of how much risk and reward, or how much risk do I want to wager to optimize or maximize my amount learned. As I mentioned in my previous video, I mentioned, right, I don't think the future of thought and thinkers is going to be in academic journals or in press or in paper or in books. I think the great thinkers of our time will be from the internet and through voice and through video. And so maybe that's another thing I'm wondering about, is would my time be best spent in a PhD program? And I'm not saying it won't be or shouldn't be, or that I'm arrogant enough to think I could learn more than what would be streamlined and delivered to me in a PhD program. But you think, right, like, it's not a coincidence that most people set up the rest of their lives in their 20s. And so there's always a sacrifice to be made, and the biggest impacts are the ones that happens earliest in your life, because they exponentially grow. Just by chance, the longer you've lived, the more earlier decisions have an impact, and they have more time to resonate and grow and branch off. And so I'm going to leave this video there, that where I'm at is a crossroads. Maybe not formally or logistically, maybe not necessarily challenging going to a PhD program, but a crossroads mentally in sorting that out for myself. Right? And I don't think a crossroads has to always be equal, right? It doesn't be a crossroads in the sense that I'm likely to do either. So I think I'm more likely to go to grad school. But that doesn't mean it's not a crossroads, right? But what I do, since right, like, this YouTube channel is nothing right now, right? Like, I couldn't support myself off of this. But that's not to say that I couldn't, experience life outside of academia and outside of formal education. And while maybe the grass isn't always green on the other side, and maybe I'm blinded by all the good things going for me, but I think we have to all think through things honestly, and that's honestly where I'm at. So I guess I'll leave you all with that. This video's probably very rambly, all over the place, but I'm in a car, just driving, so tease what to tease, and yeah, think about where you guys are at, whatever that means, because I never thought, I didn't think going into this idea of a series again that this would be the question that thus far that's really struck me as one that I hadn't considered enough. And maybe that's just me. Maybe other people are conscious, are always thinking about where they're at, but I haven't really thought about it. Yeah, let me know where you're at. Leave a comment on the video. Let me know where you're at. I'll see you guys in the next video. YouTube.